Dankeschön. Guten Abend. Na, guten Tag, I guess. Nicht Abend, schon. Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Es freut mich sehr, hier in der Universität Bayreuth zu sein und auch in Bayreuth, die Stadt Richard Wagners zu sein. Es freut mich sehr. Ich wünsche Professor Voracek davor, dass mich hier zu diesem Symposium eingeladen hat, danken. Schade, dass nicht hier mit uns sein kann. Die Sprache des Symposiums ist Englisch, so I'll turn to English now. I agree with the service dominant logic. Of course I do. I've been working with it for long. There are, of course, details we can discuss and some things that I think need to be refined and some things that I think are misunderstood. But I don't know what's the percentage, 95% or more. Of course, I agree. Now, one thing where I don't agree is, as you can see there, is the term service dominant logic. I think it's incorrect, and dominant is redundant there because it's not a logic dominated by service. It is a logic of service, which, of course, Steve Vargo proved very efficiently in his speech here. I know the reason why dominant's in there, but I think it's redundant now. It can very well be left out. Now, I'm going to talk about business-to-business and relationship marketing and how service is a business logic that fits in there and how it can be used. It is relating to a research project, a huge research project we have at Hanken School of Economics in Finland. It's on a business-to-business. It relates to manufacturing, that is firms that consider themselves goods producers and that are indeed producing as the core of their offering the resource that we still could call a good. I'll just try to explain this view. And I agree totally with the one premise of the service dominant logic, stating that it is a firm that adopts a service logic is customer and relationship orientated by definition. It goes the other way around too. A firm that is relationship orientated is by definition service business. It can't work the other way around. You can't do relationship marketing. That's one of the premises of relationship marketing. You can't understand and implement relationship marketing in business unless you view the firm as a service business. And what that means, let me turn into that. Now, what now follows is the worst slide. The rest of the slides will be much better from a, let's say, viewing point of view. See what I mean? What I'm explaining here, or just showing here, is a fact of reality in a business-to-business marketing. This is how it is. Not as linear as here, but I put various business practices now as they would go on in a certain linear fashion, one following the other. It's iterative, goes around, but this is how reality works. Well, reality is even more complicated because everything of this most often happens in a network. I've excluded a network, keep it simple, and just have here the supplier and the customer. And what it's all about is that a customer always has a row of everyday practices. In a business-to-business situation, these practices are processes, things that the customer is doing, like analyzing what is needed, what is done, purchasing, ordering, warehousing, installing, paying, doing cost control, using, needing information, having problems, making complaints, having a need to upgrade and upgrading and modernizing machinery and equipment and other things, and so on and so forth. Now, correspondingly, the other party on the market, which we traditionally call supplier and still should call supplier in my mind, have a corresponding number of practices, which also are processes. And excuse me for forgetting to add every day here. Every day means that this is things that's going on every day. That's things that takes place every day. They are everyday practices in that sense. And that's about some market research, sales, marketing, research, development, product development, service development, order processes, logistics, deliveries, installing, invoicing, repairing, maintaining, even perhaps operating customers, some processes, call center services, documentation, complaints handling, recovery, engineering, technology development, and so on and so forth. They don't follow one in as linearly as here, but I've put them on a line here to keep it simple, as I said. Now, this is how reality looks. And the question then is, what is the supplier doing if it doesn't take a relationship approach? Well, what it does, it looks at, for example, the usage process of the customer, and then tries to develop and then activates those of its own practices that develops, understands this usage process, develops a product, and delivers this product, and perhaps helps the customer make the product operational as the core activity. And the rest relating to order taking, invoicing, complaints handling, call center services, information documentation for the customers is taken care of not with the same focus on the customer, not the same customer focus, more or less add-ons as marginal things. That is what we call a good logic approach here. Now, that doesn't fit the relationship, because from the customer's point of view, these practices are everyday practices that go on continuously. And even though the product, the good delivered, is the best in the world, if it's delivered too late, if there's problems with the invoices, if it is sloppily and slowly maintained, if there are problems with handling complaints take time to manage complaints, the customers will not be able to run a good, profitable business with that support of the supplier. A relationship approach means that the supplier needs to make sure that this flow of customer practices are indeed doing something very important, and that is supporting the business process. That is enabling growth opportunities for the customer, enabling premium pricing opportunities for the customer, and enabling cost savings opportunities for the customer, or some of these, or all of these at the same time. Now, the only way of doing that is to make sure, going back to this picture here, that the corresponding supplier practices to the customer practices indeed support the customer practices in a way that, where possible, they have a positive impact on growth opportunities. We can sell more to new markets, penetrate old markets better, and so forth. Has an effect on premium pricing opportunities. We have a better quality. We can deliver quicker. We can make sure this fits our customers as this customer better, and so forth. Or cost savings opportunities. It costs less to handle our practice with the corresponding support by the supplier. This is the fact of life. This is how business works. Now, of course, the supplier gives something back the customer gives something back to the supplier. But the customer gives money, of course, back, but it could be also information, and it could be business intelligence about the market that the supplier can use in approaching other customers in the same market, in other markets, and other things like that. In that sense, service are indeed exchanged for service, yes. Now I'm looking, but still, even if this is the case, there are still the supplier and the customer. And we have to make sure that we keep that clear and don't mess these two things together, because then we won't be able to develop a practical understanding of what the service logic is all about. Now, the interesting thing here is not only the business process of the customer that is supported, because according to relationship marketing theory, it truly is a win-win situation, and both parties are in the same boat. And we can clearly show that every supplier practice that supports the customer corresponding practice in a way that creates these positive effects on the business process of the customer has a similar positive effect on the supplier's business process. It makes it possible for the customer to do premium pricing, perhaps. It makes it possible for a customer to grow resales, cross-sales, up-sales, and it makes it possible for the customer to keep costs down. I mean, if we are delivering the right thing, we don't have to do it all over again, it costs less. If we can take care of a customer problem quickly, we don't have to put so much effort into complaints, control, and all those things, and it costs much less for the supplier. So this is actually the business process of both parties here in this market. The key question is, of course, how well are the supplier's practices supporting the corresponding customer practices? And are they supporting the customer's business practice? And these are questions that very seldom seems to be asked in practice by suppliers. And why? Well, Steve Vargo showed that very, very clearly. They have a old-fashioned, let's try to fly this way of looking at business. They have they follow a goods logic. Now, applying a service logic, it supports the relationship marketing approach. And we realized that these questions have to be asked. So there's some homework to be done. And it's a matter not of focusing only on the core of what we still could call the offering, in this case being products, if we are studying manufacturers. We could also study so-called service firms in this way. Same goes, same applies. Usage is not of a good, it's usage of for example, a software or a financial solution or an insurance solution or something. But now we are studying manufacturing. So there are questions that have to be asked first. Questions like these: how do customers order products and service solutions? How are they delivered? What happens when they have been delivered? How are they installed? How are they made operational? How are they moved around? How are they paid for? How are they used? Baking soda, not used for what originally was the idea with baking soda, as we heard here. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that etc. means there are other questions as well that have to be asked, depending on what's the context where we are right now. What's the customer doing? What are we doing? Where are we trying to support the customer? Now, if these questions are asked, no service logic is adopted, because we are not going to perform according to that. We will perform according to a goods logic. And there are then the two necessary follow-up questions. Number one, which of these everyday practices of the customer are essential for the customer's business process? All are not. Almost all are essential for the customer's cost level, and in that sense, essential for the customer's business process. But all are not essential for the customer's possibility to premium price or to penetrate old markets or new markets better. These analyses have to be done, and when we have answers to these questions, then we know what to do. We need to know how we as a supplier can support the customer's practices in a value-creating way so that the customer's business process is successfully supported as well. And supporting the customer's business plus successful means, as I said, through providing growth or premium pricing opportunities or cost savings opportunities, either or all of them or some of them. On top of this, of course, relationship marketing theory tells us that if this is done successfully, the customer's trust in the supplier will grow, the supplier's attraction to the customer will grow, the customer's attraction to the supplier will grow, and all sorts of nice things that will make the two parties more committed to each other will grow. Now, what is value really then, just to go through this once again, because this is quite interesting. For the customer, we talk about value creation. The customers create value. And the idea, of course, here is to understand that the customers create value. The goods logic says that value is embedded in the product, in the goods or in the service activities, which is not true if you look at this from a service logic point of view. The customers create value. And I won't go to a discussion about the relationship, what's the customer, what's the firm doing in value creation. but I'm a little bit skeptical about the word co-creation because it is not that easy. Now, growth opportunities, premium pricing opportunities, as I said, and those are monetary, and then there are these perceptual effects. And value for the supplier, then we talk about in business about value capture. What's the value that the supplier can capture from supporting a customer? So that is kind of the other side of the mirror when we look at value creation. The value we can capture there. Well, it's upsales, cross-sales, resales, premium pricing, cost savings, same things, monetary, but then of course the same perceptual effects as well here. Now, this, if the customers, we can support the customers so they can create value out of our support, the supplier relationship will strengthen. This strengthens the customer's relationship with the supplier. But the interesting thing here, of course, is that it really is a win-win situation, because at the same time then, if we can do this as a supplier, the supplier's relationship with the customer will strengthen, because it will enable resales, cross-sales, upsales opportunities, premium pricing, and so forth. So the value creation, value capture here is important, because from a relationship market perspective, it enables good relationship marketing, strengthens the relationships, and therefore sets an even better foundation for future successful business with this same customer that then can be used as references for getting new customers. Now, that's what I would say, these are facts, which I don't think can be disputed. This is what's going on the market. So then the question is, how can we understand service logic in a relationship marketing context, keeping in mind these more or less facts? So the key to solving the problem, the problem of supporting the customer's business processes is to adopt a service business logic. I call it service business logic here because all businesses adopting a service logic should be and are service businesses. And service, in my view, and there's no conflict there, is to facilitate assistance or to support another party's practices. If we can support another party's practices, we are providing service, because we are doing something from which the other party can create value for themselves. Now, I think it's important here to keep in mind that it's really a multifaceted issue, this service logic, because the logic is different seen from the customer side and seen from the supplier side. Now, again, these may be reciprocal situations, because service exchange for service idea here, which means that the customer is in a way in a supplier situation at the same time. But we have to look at this differently, because if you are in the supplier position, it's different, even though you at the same time might be in the customer situation. We have to keep these apart, otherwise it gets messed up, and we can't, from a practical standpoint, create really any understanding of what's business really all about. How should we think? What should we do? Now, there's a logic for usage, customer service logic, and a logic for provision, a supplier service logic. Now, let's look at those two separately here. The logic for usage, these are the same things. This is the complicated way of saying it. This is the somewhat less complicated way of saying it. But the logic for usage, seen from the customer's point of view, is that customers use the assistance they get from a supplier in the form of products, service, activities, because services, yes, it's tricky to use the word, but service activities still exist. Maintenance still exists, and that is a service activity, whereas the machine is a good. So we have service activities have not disappeared, but we have to keep apart a real distinction between service and the service activities as intangible resources, and then goods as tangible resources. Now, product, service activities, information, other tangible and intangible resources, together with other necessary resources available to them and skills and knowledge held by them in a self-service process, as a service that renders value to them in their practices. So we use whatever we get, and Steve made this point as well, we may add our own resources and our skills and all those things, and using this, to use one of the formulations is one of the 10 premises, the customers integrate these resources in order to consume a service or use a service that renders value for them. Now, self-service, it's interesting. I mean, it's really not, when we are running operating a production machine in a business, in a paper mill, for example, it's very similar to a self-service process of going to a cafeteria and having to get, as a self-service, coffee or tea from a vending machine. The tangible resources are there for our use, but we have to add our resources, our skills on how to operate the tangible resource, and then we get the service of producing paper or being able to drink coffee, which creates value of different sorts for the paper mill and for us. So all consumption really is self-service. And that means, to put it shortly, the customer uses what the supplier provides them with in a self-service process in order to create value for themselves. That's the logic from the customer, put very simplistically in a way. That's very well fits the relationship marketing point of view. Now, from a supplier's point of view, the supplier, the logic for provision would say the suppliers facilitate processes that as an integrated solution supports its customer's business process through support to the customer's everyday processes. Being able to provide efficiency, effectiveness and cost savings to the customer's various everyday practices, the customer can perhaps grow premium price and have a lower costs and therefore run a better business. In short, this means that the supplier supports its customer's business process by facilitating support to their everyday practices in a value-creating way and thereby capturing value for themselves, because both are there in the same boat according to service marketing theory, and in reality it can be shown that it is like that. Now, these are the two logics. The customer uses resources provided to them in a service process, as service, in order to create value out of this self-service usage process for themselves. And the supplier logic is the supplier should facilitate processes, the flow of processes, all these practices talking about here, in a way that they support the customer's corresponding processes in a way that makes it possible for the customer to create value in their business for themselves. And then these two have to be matched together. That's what it's all about then. And the question in a business-to-business situation is to create a business model that matches the supplier adopting a service logic for provision with the customer adopting a service logic of usage, so that the customer will be able to create more value than otherwise out of this support from this supplier, and thereby the supplier can capture more value out of this way of supporting the customer. And this is the research we are doing, trying to develop business models that help this. And I can assure you it is in practice extremely difficult, because in most markets customers do not trust their suppliers. They do not open up their books. They don't show their cost drivers. They don't show what drives their pricing. They don't show their earnings logic to the supplier. And the supplier really don't want to show too much to the customer as well, because then they will tell, how do you have these much markup prices? But if a service logic is to be adopted in relationship marketing in a business-to-business setting, the two parties must not remain this secretive, and they must not show or be this distrustive of each other, because then a service logic cannot be adopted and they will both remain in a goods logic mode. And the question is how to create this trust, how make them open up. Now, part of a business model is here that we realized in this research project is to open up this, to create a process of making the two trusting each other. I won't go into that, but it's a series of workshops that have to be done. First, on the strategic level, the two parties have to find that, yes, there seems to be something that tells us that we are in the same boat. We can create value for us, the customer, in the same time as you capture value for us if we change the way we are operating our practices, the customer, and you change some ways in which you operate your practices, the supplier. So they match each other better. Let me give one example. There is a controversial investment of a paper mill in Uruguay by one of the big Finnish paper mills called the Reel firm. And it's controversial because there is an internal argument between Uruguay and Argentina about who owns what and who has right to what and who's hurting whom and so forth. And that has been a little problematic. That put aside, Andritz, which is an Austrian supplier of machinery, engines, equipment and services to service activities to paper mills. They managed to create this trust by doing it this way. They approached Reel and said, we'll offer you, and you also have a tender here, and you have sent this tender to other suppliers of equipment too. But we offer you to show exactly our books, our cost drivers as suppliers when producing equipment, producing automation resources, producing maintenance services and all that. So you show exactly what costs for us. And if we do it various ways, what will it cost? What are our cost drivers, what are our cost effects, and what is our learnings logic? What happened was that Reel, the buyer, realized that we'd better open up our books as well and show our cost drivers and show our earnings logic and show what creates costs and what makes us save on costs and what makes us produce better quality of the paper there and so forth. And then they got together. And they came, first of all, the others, Metso is the other big, it's a Finnish big supplier of equipment to paper mills. They just lost the tender because their approach is the old-fashioned way. And they managed to get everything done at a lower price and quicker than expected, being in place there in Uruguay, and so forth. So these things are required. There are various ways. This is just one way of doing it, but are needed in order to create this trust. So we look into each other's processes and realize how can we, as a supplier, support better your everyday practices. And the supplier realizes that, okay, that's possible for the customer realizes that's possible for the supplier too. That seems to be not possible. That's why their price level is there and so forth. So, to come to a conclusion here, because my time, I guess, is used up now. Oh yes, please remember this value in use we're talking about. There's no value in the equipment to the paper mill. There's only value when the paper mill can use the equipment. Please remember that. Value in use really is important to understand here, and if one wants to understand the service logic. So this is just to sum up what it's all about, what the supplier has to do, and what the customer has to do. So the challenge for research is what we have is this: to develop a business model for joint value creation, meaning value capture based on a service business logic approach for the supplier, and value creation for the customer, whereby value creation, the customer's business process can be supported and the supplier can capture value for support of the customer's processes, and this can be enhanced. And then to develop metrics to measure the amount of value creation and value capture that is achieved. And we are almost there right now, and all the empirical studies are done in 1, 2, 3, 4 dyads, business-to-business dyads in 3 different manufacturing industries. And the metrics are there, and they function. So it just have to be written up as a PhD thesis. So, thank you very much.